Friday on Daily Delivery. Michael Rand here. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everyone's having a great day out there today. Hope you're getting used to these late nights. You got the Wild playing pretty late last night. It wasn't too bad, but that thing didn't get over till almost 11 because puck drop really wasn't until more like 8:20. You had the Vikings on the clock until about 10. A lot of things to keep your eyes on and a lot of things to talk about, obviously, on this episode. Chris Hine from the Star Tribune joins me in a little bit to talk Timberwolves, another opportunity to be up relatively late. At least it's a weekend now, Friday into Saturday. Game time, 8 o'clock tonight. You know the tip won't be till a little bit later than that. Probably be another 11 o'clock finish, but a pivotal game for the Wolves. Game 3 at Target Center, series tied 1-1 against the Lakers. They have not been good at home in the playoffs recently. That's something Chris and I will talk about, in addition to, adjustments they might need to make, whether it's their own adjustments, whether it's figuring out what the Lakers are trying to get them to do offensively, whether it's, making some adjustments to their personnel and who they're deploying at various times. Chris and I will get into all of that here in just a little bit. Parking the Twins at the back of the show. They lost yesterday, a rain-soaked game, the last of 3 against the White Sox. They had won the first 2. Now comes a big series against the Angels starting tonight. Wild here in just a minute. That's a huge story, a huge game for them, but I got to get to the Vikings here first. What did I miss? You take Donovan Jackson, Ohio State offensive lineman with the number 24 overall pick last night. I've got some conflicting thoughts on this that I need to work through on this show because we're sitting there watching this all unfold last night. It's probably around 9:45, 10 o'clock. They're finally on the clock at number 24. You're hearing rumblings that the Giants are trying to move back up into the first round to take a quarterback. But the Vikings end up staying put at 24, getting their guy, offensive lineman from Ohio State, Donovan Jackson, who had a really good year last year, right? He slides over from guard to tackle in the middle of last season because of injuries, performs admirably there, performs maybe above admirably, performs exceptionally during their run to the college football playoff championship. Probably projects to be a guard on the Vikings. You would imagine they've got their bookend tackles already, but you slot him in with everything else they've done. New center, Will Fries at the guard, Kelly at center, all the things they've done. The Vikings have the potential, at least, to have not just an upgraded offensive line. They have the potential to have a very good offensive line if everyone's healthy, if they hit on the guys that they added through the draft and free agency so far this year. So you get why they would just stay at 24, and at the same time, you wonder if they could have extracted some value there and built up their depth for this year and future years, because in the very next pick, the Giants do jump up into the back into the first round. They trade their number. They get the number 25 pick, so the pick right above the Vikings, and they end up trading. They end up trading 34, 99, and a 2026 third round pick. So the Vikings could have gotten an extra top 100 pick this year and a third round pick next year to move down what essentially would have been 10 spots for them, 34 to 24, because that's what the Giants were offering the Texans. So, you talk about that, you're like, okay, if you move down 10 spots, how much are you really losing? How much do you love the player that you are taking at 24 versus what you could get at 34? Those are the questions they had to weigh. The question I'm asking is basically, yes, I think they made a good pick, but did they make the right move? Did they make the right decision? Did they get scared by past experiences trading down, especially 2022? Kind of sounded like it based on GM Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's comments after the draft. Here he was. These are kind of split up. These are a few different chunks of different things he said post-draft.
People had called, but it really didn't get heated up until right before our pick. But we had really gone through these kind of simulation exercises with Donovan, and what if we got offered, X or Y, and nobody, we in those moments, we really wanted to really like the player, and we were really happy with what we were getting. I'm not going to say what people called. I think I just read that. That was not a phone call we had received specifically, but just excited about Donovan and what we were able to get. I was a golfer in high school. I was okay, wasn't great, but when you start to get good at golf is when you start removing like the triple bogeys from your round, the double bogeys. And how do you do that? Is you hit one in the rough. You don't take your 3-wood out and start hacking away. Maybe you take your 7-iron, play the lie, get 50 yards short, chip up, and get up and down for a bogey, worst case. And so to me, I think approaching this draft from a mindset of, hey, let's just hit, if the play is to hit the ball down the fairway, let's do that. If it's going to be 4 picks at 4 positions that we really want, 4 great character people, 4 skill sets we require, let's go do that, and we'll figure everything else out. So that's the mindset we've tried to approach and take. Whether other things happen later down the line, but we've kind of just gone from the let's whatever the course is kind of asking us to hit, we're going to hit that club out of the bag and see what happens.
Now again, there's no sin in just staying where you are and making picks, right? Like that's sometimes we'll just like do the easy thing. Don't make it too hard on yourselves. We can discuss whether Jackson's the right pick. He certainly fits. He certainly has done a lot to make you think he is worthy of being in that spot. Maybe his draft grade was a little bit lower than 24, but if the Vikings believed in him, if they really liked him, there is no shame in taking a player you really like at a position you still need at 24. The question then becomes, though, like you've got some future needs coming up here that are going to start hitting in 2026 and beyond. You can't keep dipping into free agency for all of your needs. If you could have picked up an extra, top 100 pick this season, 2 spots below the 97 pick where they have their next pick in the draft here, and then you could have also gotten a 3rd rounder next year. Like that's some pretty nice capital to have to be able to get some more impact this season. So I just, impact this season and for beyond, because you only have 4 picks this season. Your depth is not going to be greatly impacted by those 4 picks. Like you've really got to hit on all those guys to feel like you're in a good spot. So, did the experience of 2022 in particular, where they trade down out of number 12, end up not getting a lot of bang for their buck? You could have just sat there and taken Kyle Hamilton at safety. You end up taking Lewis Seen at safety. That does not work out. Did that make them shy to do this move? I don't know. I think all of it depends on how much you like Jackson, how much they like Jackson, where they were with the process. I think it's a fair question to ask, though. Even if you like the pick, did they make the right decision? And I think it's an impossible question to know, but I think time will tell if it was the right decision. What we do know is this. The Wild are hitting on all cylinders right now. Another 5-2 shellacking, I don't think there's any more of a polite way to put it, of Vegas on Thursday night at XL Energy Center. The Wild, like the Wolves, who we'll talk about here in a minute with Chris Hine, have not been a good home playoff team in recent years. They've been a better road playoff team in general heading into Thursday night. So I was like, okay, both of these teams have stolen home court, home ice advantage by winning 1 of 2 on the road. Can they now take advantage of it? First opportunity, the Wild, absolutely. They blitz Vegas right out of the gate, score 2 goals early in the first period, and it's not like they cruised or coasted from there, but they never trailed. It got to 2-1, but then it was 3-1. A huge goal, 4-1 at the end of the second period. Ryan Hartman looks up, sees there's barely any time left. They're on the power play, just fires one on net. It goes in. So there you have a goal there. Just in general, just a better overall performance there from the power play, from the specialty teams, things like that, even though they gave up a shorthanded goal in the midway through the third period. They defended pretty well on the Vegas power plays. Philip Gustafson, after a shaky first soft goal, was tremendous all night. 5-2. They have a 2-1 series lead. They've been there before. We know that. They've had a couple 2-1 series leads in a couple recent series, but if we dare say it, this feels a little bit different. Even as we understand hockey momentum can change, even if we understand that Vegas probably hasn't shown them their best game yet, we'll have all sorts of desperation on Saturday in Game 4. Even if we say all that, The difference right now is the level at which the Wild's best players are playing, especially that first line. Kaprizov and Boldy have been unbelievable, off the charts. Kaprizov, 2 more goals in this game. Boldy gets tallied. Everybody's just like contributing. Everybody looks like they are playing at an extremely high level. When you have your superstar Kaprizov going at that level, you are dangerous on any shift he is on the ice. They just flat out look 100% different than what they did at the until the end of the regular season when they got Kaprizov back. Maybe they were just sputtering to the finish, trying to hang on, winning these really like low event games, just trying to like be as boring as possible, as safe as possible, take advantage of wherever they could get a bunch of 2-1, try to win, get it to overtime, at least get a point. That strategy looks to have been pretty effective in the end here as we look at it, because now they're in the postseason. And they look a lot better now that they have their best players back. Can they sustain it Saturday? I don't know. Like I said, they've been there before. They have not been able to sustain it. They've taken 2-1 leads and turned those into 4-2 series losses. The job is to finish it now. The job is to finish it. Win game 4. That's not finishing it, but that's putting you in a 3-1 series lead where you're in command, where you have 3 shots at it, 3 cracks at it, including 1 more home game if they need it in game 6. Huge one Saturday, but so far they took advantage of stealing back home ice. They looked tremendous. It was a fun game to watch. Lots of energy at XL Energy Center. So you're feeling that right now. You're feeling that this could be different. Can they put the exclamation point on it and finish the job? Let's talk Timberwolves today on Daily Delivery with Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. Game 3 feels pretty significant, Chris. So they're all big in the playoffs, but you come home tied 1-1 in a series. You've lost Game 2 on the road. Not maybe felt great about the way that transpired. And you come back after, which we'll get into, not playing very well at home in the playoffs last season. This feels like it's shaping up to be not a end-all be-all, but a pretty pivotal game in the series Friday night at Target Center.
Yeah, this is it. You hold serve at home and you win the series. And I don't know that you necessarily want to go back to LA 2-2. But this team has to figure out whatever it is, game day routine, better intensity from the start. I don't know what it is, but last year in the postseason they were, I think it was 3-5. And then 6-2 on the road. So
yeah,
whatever was missing in these home games, I think maybe a little bit of complacency. I think Chris Finch chalked that up in the Denver series last year to being up 2-0 and being a little complacent. Well, they shouldn't be complacent after what happened the other night in Los Angeles. So there's that. They have the motivation of a recent loss to maybe jumpstart them a little bit. But also in these games, they have not started well in either of these games, and I wonder how that's going to play out in Game 3. What do they do differently from the jump to try to get a better start? And Luka Doncic has really controlled the opening minutes of each of these 2 games, so. Better start, more energy, whatever it is, they got to figure it out ahead of tomorrow night.
The good start is a good point, because I think maybe we forget about that quickly because of Game 1. Like the last 3 quarters were tremendous, but they were down 28-21 at the end of one. I can't. It was like 5 or 7 point deficit at the end of that quarter. They weren't clicking offensively, and the same thing can be said for Game 2, which was even worse. I think they were outscored 34-15 in the first quarter of that game. How do they change that? I mean, is it different rotations? Is it different lineups? Is it just better execution? Like, how do you think Chris Finch manages that question in Game 3?
I think it boils down to better execution. Honestly, I don't know that they need to change any rotations or anything like that. I think they have a formula against this team, and kind of hearing them talk today, it didn't sound like the Lakers did all that much differently defensively. Schematically. Obviously, from a physical standpoint, intensity standpoint, the Lakers, kicked it up to another level. But I don't think, it should have been that hard for the Wolves to figure out what they were doing. Anthony Edwards said he was kind of puzzled last night or 2 nights ago. But I don't I don't know that the Lakers were necessarily doing a lot differently. And so, with that in mind, you kind of know by this point how they want to defend you, what they're going to do. So there shouldn't be a feeling out period early in these games the way that there seems to have been for Ant and company in the opening minutes. So, you come up maybe with some sets, you come up with some play calls and try to go from there. But at the end of the day, I think the Wolves control a lot of this in their hands and how they react to it. And because I do think overall in the series, they're the deeper team. And, 1 through 5, anytime one of their 5s on the floor versus the Lakers, like, they're a deeper team. It's just, as we've seen before, they sometimes just can't get out of their own way.
The depth should mean that one supporting player isn't necessarily the end-all, be-all, but it does feel like, at least in the starting lineup, someone like Jaden McDaniels, who had 25 in Game 1 and I think 8 in Game 2, he was more consistent being in double figures for a long stretch during the regular season, but that, someone like him really kind of tilts how you look at that first unit, because if he can be kind of that third scorer behind Edwards and Julius Randle, it feels like a much more workable lineup than if you feel like, we've got, if you're from the Wolves standpoint, you've got 2 guys out there that can score and then 3 guys who, maybe aren't always offense first players. And especially Conley at this point in his career just isn't like always looking for his shot. So, it's this kind of trade-off where you wonder, like, I think they even said it on the broadcast the other night, like, sometimes their best lineup looks like Ant and Randall and the 3 guys that come in reserve-wise, but it's a completely different look. It's a completely different how you're good. And so I'm wondering, like, how they might have to mix and match that, which they've done. Nothing was really working in Game 2, but I do wonder if they have to make quicker decisions if the offense isn't clicking in Game 3.
Well, that's just it. It's quicker decision making. I think, getting off the ball a little earlier in situations. And I thought there was a number of times where, maybe an easy pass was there to somebody on the wing or something like that. After he played really well in Game 1, I thought, with the 9 assists. And, I also think, and this has been said a lot over the last 48 hours, I don't know that the Wolves as a collective unit are going to play as bad as they did in Game 2 for the rest of the series. That's one of the things you hang your hat on if you're the Wolves. It's like, well, we really can't play much worse than that. We only lost by 9 points. So, I do buy that. But what I also don't buy is that their defense is going to hold the Lakers under 100 for the rest of the series, given the top 2 players and some of the firepower that could happen coming off the bench for the Lakers, or at least in the rest of the starting lineup. If Luka and LeBron can get some of those guys going, I don't know that they're going to be under 100. So the Wolves just have to outscore the Lakers, Luka and LeBron, to they got to get into the 115, 120 range here. If they get to 115, 120, I think they can hold the Lakers around 110. I think that's reasonable, 110 to 115 versus like 115 to 120. I think that's kind of the score range that you have to be shooting for. The Lakers were not a great defensive team throughout the season, pre and post Luka trade. They are vulnerable. They are able to be attacked. The Wolves have to find a way, I think, to get Rudy Gobert a little more involved.
100%.
We saw him punish small teams late in the season. Lakers are not a big team. I think he's had single-digit shot attempts combined over the first 2 games. And I think in some ways the Lakers are willing to live with the Wolves trying to use Rudy, but the Wolves have been reluctant to use him so far. So I'll be interested to see if they try to get Rudy a little more involved on the rolls and lobs and things like that, especially in the minutes when Jackson Hayes may not be on the floor. That's been their mantra all season, and really since they made the Gobert trade, is we have to try to punish teams when they go small against us. Game 2, they really didn't do that. So I think no matter who's on the floor, whether it is the Reed-Randall combo, whether it is Rudy, yes, there's different styles of play, but the Wolves, I think, still have to use that size to their advantage.
I agree. It was kind of weird. Like Game 2, it seemed like Gobert on the floor, he was good defensively. I didn't feel like he was a liability in those kind of pick and roll situations, or when they got switched out on Luka or a smaller player. Like, yeah, I think Reeves went around him once, but like by and large, I thought he held his own in those situations. So it's like, if he can do that against a smaller lineup, you'd like to think the Wolves have the advantage, but they couldn't then take advantage on the other end where he should be able to, against, if Rui Hachimura is the tallest player on the court for the Lakers, or LeBron is the most physical player, like Gobert should have the advantage on the offensive end if they're able to get it to him. And I feel like they only had like one lob. I think it was like DiVincenzo in the third period got him a lob dunk finally. You thought that might get it going, but it really didn't in that game.
No, it didn't. And I don't know. The Lakers were kind of packing the paint a lot in game one, so I guess that's part of the reason why you don't really involve Rudy as much if there's just more bodies in and around the hoop. But I think that's something they have to be a little more intentional about, especially if Rudy is going to be on the floor. I thought isolation wise, people on the internet always love to say Rudy gets cooked and this and that, but I think there were times where Luka and Austin Reeves scored on him. There were times where they didn't. And I think overall, if you end up with a possession where those guys are just isoing dribble, and Luka's having to work a lot in those situations, and Rudy does make him work for it, I don't think that that's necessarily all a bad thing for the Wolves throughout the course of the game. The Lakers aren't really running good offense in those situations, and they might be tiring Luka out a little bit.
Yeah, and the national narrative will tell you that conditioning is maybe not Luka's strong suit, and there's something to be said for. I know you would not terribly love a long, drawn-out series. It does feel like maybe we're headed that way, but it does feel like a longer, drawn-out series, depending on the type of games that they end up getting into, and we get to that in a minute, but a longer, drawn-out series where the other day LeBron had to play 42 minutes, Luka had to play 42 minutes. Like, those guys look tired at the end of the game. Like, if you get to a game 6 and those guys have been playing 40 to 42 minutes a game, I do think there is a certain attrition that benefits the Wolves as time goes on, potentially, as something to watch as the series goes on.
I don't disagree with that. And if we get to that point in the series, it'll definitely be something worth monitoring, because we have essentially 36 hours between games 3 and 4. Game 3 is at 8:30.
That's right.
Game 4 is like 3 o'clock on Sunday.
That's right. That's a tight turnaround.
Then there's 2 days between games 4 and 5, but only 1 day between games 5 and 6 with a flight back to Minnesota for that. And then if it goes 7, only 1 day between 6 and 7 with another flight back to Los Angeles. So you would like to think the younger legs of the Timberwolves would maybe hold up a little better than Luka and LeBron in that situation, but also you don't want to be put in that. You don't want to be put in that situation.
Yeah.
And then it might affect you in round 2 should you advance.
That's true.
Well, but I think to your point, this is again where the Wolves' depth really comes into play, and the ability to shape shift and play different styles and go smaller if they want to. And game 1, Gobert only plays 24 minutes, and playing Naz Reid 30 minutes off the bench, or whoever's got it going that particular night. The ability to shape shift and not have to play guys into the low 40s. Your regular starting 5 is one of the strengths of this team coming into the postseason. It's just everybody was just off on Tuesday night, whether it was, I think Mike Conley kind of said it best, everything was just a beat off. Mm-hmm. They were a beat off making the right play, making the right pass, driving, whatever it was, everything was just a step too slow, or a second too slow. And so that was kind of the diagnosis at practice today, so we'll see if they can pick it up.
I'm curious that they said the Lakers didn't do much different, because I thought the way they defended Ant in game 2 was different, and that it wasn't so much double teams as it was like if he got past the first guy, they were just throwing a whole bunch of stuff at him kind of in that secondary drive to make sure he didn't have to get to the basket and then had to kind of make decisions on the fly instead of out of a double team. But if they're saying it was essentially the same coverage, then maybe it was just that they weren't doing what they needed to do to beat that coverage.
Yeah, that seems to be it. I don't think the Lakers reinvented the wheel defensively between games 1 and 2. Like I said, I think a lot of it was just a product of them, especially early on. Like just I think it may be attacking screens a little more aggressively, pushing the Wolves out further on the perimeter when they would switch, things like that they weren't doing in game 1 that they were doing in game 2. And that I think just in and of itself was disrupting the rhythm, especially in that first quarter of the Wolves' offense. The Wolves didn't look like they were quite ready for that level of intensity for coming from the Lakers. So, we'll see what kind of counters. I thought, in situations like that, you always want to try to, utilize back screens, back cutting a little bit, but that's, sometimes that isn't the forte of the Wolves' offense, the cutting aspect of it.
No.
So we'll see if they've tweaked that as well. At the end of the day, it's also taking advantage of the ball movement, the shifting of the defense. It's got to be quicker. Guys attacking the hoop out of the wings, out of the corners when the defense is shifting around. They weren't doing that in game 2, and it's on Ant and Julius to make quick decisions. They were scoring at a decent clip, but I feel like the ball movement could also be better from everybody involved, including those two.
Final thing, it feels like the national narrative, or even some of the narrative, especially with locally, but even nationally, did like a 180 after game 1. It didn't come all the way back around after game 2 because it feels like a lot of people would consider this more of a coin flip than a 60-40, 70-30 series after these first 2 games. And I think some of it's just the fact that it's 1-1, but some of it's the fact of how the 1-1 is transpired. Would you say that's accurate? It's
accurate. I think so. Like I said, I think given the Wolves were there late in the game, potentially making a run, and then they committed 3 straight turnovers when they cut it to 9. So they were there. They can't play much worse. And I think, you saw the Lakers came out with their best punch in the first quarter, and then the Wolves, at least defensively, were able to kind of grind them down again for the other 3 quarters of the night. And I think that's the most positive takeaway for the Wolves was how they played defensively, even if you can't expect them to hold them under 100 points the rest of the series. I think the Wolves, there wasn't much the Lakers did differently offensively to try to solve the Wolves' defense in game 2. So I think you feel pretty good from that standpoint. I just wonder when and if LeBron finds another gear in this series. That to me is if you're the Lakers, it's like, when does LeBron regain form, right?
Say enough's enough. Start making his shots. Yeah.
Correct. And really taking over in certain stretches of the game. That, I think, is the wild card for the Lakers. For the Wolves, it's, there was something that Chris Finch said during the Denver series often, which was our best is better than their best. And I really feel like that's the case in this series where
I agree too.
If the Wolves play their best, it's better than the Lakers' best. But they got to get to that level, and that's on them, and they are their own worst enemy at times. So can they get back to what they were doing in game 1, or are they going to resemble more of the team that they were in game 2?
I don't even think they have to play like they did in game 1. I think they have to be
They don't. They have to find a happy medium.
I think they have to be like a 7 out of 10. Like I think if they're a 7 out of 10 for however many of these games are, they probably win 3 of them because I think I think their above average is better than the Lakers' above average, if that even makes sense. Like but to your point, that's probably the same way of saying, or a different way of saying the same thing. Whereas like we've seen them be like a 9 and we've seen them be like a 2 so far in this series.
That is the Timberwolves experience.
It is, and can they find it? Like that's it. Like it's unfair to say it's all on them, but to a certain degree, I think Nas said it the other night. Like a lot of it is like what they do, so less than it is what an opponent does, and that's probably heartening for them, but it's also frustrating for them, and it's probably makes them a frustrating watch at times as well.
I really feel like if they end up losing this series, they're going to be kicking themselves a lot. I really do. I think they think they're the better team. I think a lot of people that watch the series or observe it closely and aren't just paying attention to the ESPN narratives.
Right.
I think you can see it. It's just, it is about them. It is about how well they can play. Everybody off the bench and everybody that's not Ant or Julius can't be a zero in the scoring department the way that they were the other night. That's why game one was such a good formula. It was like, okay, which supporting cast guys are going to step up? And it was Jaden and Nas. You think like, okay, game two, who's it going to be? Maybe it's not a Jaden and Nas night, but you think, well, maybe it's an Akil Dante night where they hit their shot. And they did. That just didn't happen. No, game two, right? Like, so who's it going to be in game three? Who's going to have off the bench? Or whether it's Mike Conley or getting Rudy more involved, who's going to have that kind of game in game three? The kind of, to borrow a phrase from an old 30 Rock episode, that third kind of heat, right? outside of Julius and Ant, who's going to be the third kind of heat coming in? Friday night.
I don't usually do episode titles, but that'd be a good episode title. Third kind of heat.
Yes.
Well, we'll see. And if we're being honest, Chris, like, you don't want to get ahead of yourself. This is a tough series. Like, I think they have a decent chance to win. I think if they win this series, there's a decent chance they could go to the Western Conference Finals again, because I'm not blown away by Houston or Golden State at this point.
Again, it's in their grasp. Like,
it's in their grasp. It's possible. It's not possible. Likely, but it's possible. I'll say that.
Right. It's possible. They have the talent to do it. Can they, mentally get there? Can they execute? They have the talent. It's about them. At the end of the day, it's about the Church of KG. Anything is possible. Mm-hmm.
All right, Chris. Appreciate it. Good luck covering all this. For your sake, I hope there's not a million flights back and forth, but I'm kind of worried about. I'm worried about that. I'm bullish on your frequent flyer miles more than your rest at this point.
Well, I'm not bullish on my sleep, no matter what. So.
I'm not either. But we'll see. Follow Chris's stuff Friday night and beyond. Chris, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Great stuff from Chris, as always. He will be busy in the next few days, of course. Big game tonight, game 3, 8 p.m. at Target Center. I'll be interested to see the energy out of the gate. I'll be interested to see if the Wolves get off to a better start. Again, they can survive bad starts. They've shown that throughout the year because they've not generally been a good starting team. I feel like tonight is a night where they need a good start. I feel like that will kind of maintain whatever momentum they're getting from their crowd. A bad start, people in this market start getting nervous when the starts are bad. The energy changes, everything like that. I think they need a good start tonight. I think they need to carry that energy. Winning game 3 would be huge, obviously. Put them in command of the series at 2-1. Kind of erase some of what happened last year where, again, they were a much better road team than home team, especially in that Denver series last season. They've got to erase that feeling, got to erase those doubts out of their memory and get this thing into a spot where they feel like, okay, not only do we feel like we're the better team, we are now in control of the series. Speaking of a good start, the Twins didn't have it yesterday. They have not had it all season. This is 9-16 now after losing to the White Sox. Game finished early. Let's finish with the cooler with a few details from that. 3-0 loss. Pretty nondescript game. Not a lot of fans in attendance because it's a drizzly kind of afternoon. It ends after 7, like I said. 3-0, not much going on offense. Now this puts the onus on them to win the Angels series. They would have had a little bit more margin for error if you sweep the White Sox to feel like it's a good homestand. Now you got to win this series too. You got to string together, 2 out of 3s. That can get you back into 500, in no time at all. But they got to keep it going. They can't just be good against the White Sox. They can't just beat up on bad teams, win 2 out of 3 against those bad teams. They've got to do it against the better teams as well. And the Angels are okay. They're right around 500 this season. They're a decent team, but this is a team, playing at home with some of the pitchers you would want going in this series. You've got to capitalize on that and take at least 2 out of 3. That starts tonight. We'll see if they are able to get it done. That will do it for me for now. Reminder, we're doing post-game podcasts from all the Wolves games, so expect something later tonight and then again Sunday afternoon from Game 4. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Friday. Back at it again later.